Hello everyone, and welcome to this latest video discussion as part of the RICS Tech Partner Programme. My name is Andrew Knight and I've been with RICS now for over 12 years. I work now within the knowledge and practice part of the organisation, and my role is to look at the impact of data and technology right across the built and natural environment. And with over 110,000 members working worldwide, right across the property life cycle on commercial, residential, alternative assets, infrastructure. It's a very broad canvas that our members get involved in. And as I say, because they work over the full life cycle, they're looking at land and development, they're looking at construction, they're looking at brokerage, valuation, finance, building surveying, asset and building management. So really a very, very broad canvas upon which their roles will be, I think, quite profoundly affected by the opportunities that data and technology bring. And I'm really happy today to have Simon and Jason join us from Boom. So welcome both of you. And I guess it's always nice before we sort of start talking about bits and bytes in the market, just get a bit of a sense from both of you of your backstory and indeed the origin story of Boom itself. So Simon, I believe you're the founder, so you probably come up first as the person to give us a bit of a backstory and a bit of an origin story of Boom itself.
Yeah, absolutely, and thank you, Andrew, for inviting us onto today's episode. As you said, my name's Simon Skocek, and I'm the founder or co-founder of Boom, with my original co-founder Jonathan Swoboda is not with us today, who's written all of the code for the platform over the course of the last 6 years. He got a notification on LinkedIn yesterday that he's celebrating his 6th anniversary at Boom, and yeah, both of us got ourselves off the floor when he received that. So it's been quite a ride. My background is in construction. I studied my degree in construction management and building about 22 odd years ago in Australia through Newcastle University, working my way up into a commercial management role across various types of projects and infrastructure projects, for doing a master's in construction law and getting into dispute resolution for a good 6 or 7 years, but always wanted to be a developer, and got serious about it about 6 years ago when I realised that if I continued to put it off every few years, I'd never get there. And just through some research over a 6-month period, when I went away to do a business plan to get that going in Thailand, I sat on a beach every morning working on a business plan, and in the afternoon trying to get fit. The idea for Boom took place, and wanting to be a developer that brings great development and architecture to the masses was the initial idea of a development company, but then the idea of a platform that assists developers to access pipeline funding and connect with best practice. Took over, and here we are now. So we're on that journey. It's an exciting time.
Thanks, Simon. And how about yourself, Jason? Give us a bit of your backstory, if you would.
Yeah, of course. I think probably a few of the people watching this may have known me from a previous role where I was one of the co-founders of ViewCity. And ViewCity's still thriving and doing very well, but at the end of last year, I moved away from ViewCity, and I'd spent a lot of time talking with Simon and thinking about what we could do together. And that possibility still exists, but actually it was kind of a really nice move for me to come across and join the team at Boom. I've joined as Chief Commercial Officer, and I think really from having founded ViewCity and understood actually how the software was, the take-up of that and how the technology was starting to play a part in its adoption, actually recognizing that Boom was in effect further upstream than ViewCity even was really exciting for me. So, I mean, my journey started as a designer and part of marketing, and that backstory for me was one around consultation and being involved in development, from being able to explain to people how complex and difficult development was and where the value would lie in those developments coming forward. That's what inspired the kind of idea of ViewCity. But ultimately it's impossible to develop anything if you can't find the right land to develop on and the right people to develop on that land. So it's really nice. It's like I've moved further and further upstream. I feel now I'm actually at the well, if you like, the font of where this is happening, which is hugely exciting for not only the platform and where we're going and the kind of the next stages, but for me as a journey, it's been very exciting.
And
Jason's a well himself. Well of knowledge.
It'd be great just to probe slightly there, Jason, on this sense of this journey, because obviously you've been in the prop tech sector for a number of years now. What have you seen change? Because one could argue that prop tech is obviously very much here to stay, but it's been around quite a long time now. What does prop tech look like now as opposed to perhaps 10 years ago, in your view?
I mean, certainly 10 years ago when we were starting to look at maybe some of the solutions that were coming forward, it's an industry that's always been criticised for being slow to move, and actually most people would say the adoption of tech within property is still a long way behind other industry. But there is a shift, and it is changing, and it started with things like the sort of adoption of BIM. Although I know if you talk to some BIM advocates that say it's still a long way from where it should be, but gradually the kind of adoption of tech and recognising that it has a part to play, I think is starting to change, and the landscape of adoption of tech is changing. And certainly, of course, what happens is you end up with generation change. You end up with new players in the market space who are, shall we say, they've grown up with the technology we're all used to now. It's not new, it's not invented for them. It was there from the start, and I think those things are making a difference. But the other thing is the maturity of the tech that's coming forward is, I think, making a difference. When we first started to look at all the different players in the market, there were lots of, shall we say, great ideas that were then trying to land and try and find a space, but actually weren't developed out of a true problem. And I think those have fallen by the wayside. They still exist, but they do fall by the wayside sooner. I think the tech that is actually really starting to be adopted and used is the one where everybody can understand true value and see that it's also interoperable, and it's not just a single player. There's no one key answer to property technology. If there was one player, it would have found its space by now. There isn't. It's a series of a tech play that has true interoperability, and I think that's starting to come to the fore more and more as well. And I think that fundamentally that change is hugely helpful and really welcomed.
Yeah, as you say, I think there's a maturity now about that understanding that, to use the jargon, you need to build a tech stack of various solutions that talk to each other, to use the vernacular, and solve the overall solution, because there isn't a silver bullet. There's not one kind of ERP system for property in that way. And as you say, this sense of solutions that are solving real problems that show real value, both in terms of outcomes and cost benefit and stuff. Now, I guess I'm always kind of keen on these kind of discussions to both touch on the technology, but also really kind of talk about what we're trying to solve. The issues that society and real estate need addressing. And obviously, we're all very aware from a UK perspective about the lack of housing. What do you think are the main factors that are holding us back here? And to use the phrase, why are we in this situation now? I mean, we have a mature, in theory, ecosystem around housing, and yet we find ourselves year after year not building enough dwellings, not having enough housing supply, when this is a long-term problem that's been known about for a long time.
Yeah, it's a good question. I think there's a lot of people that have attempted to answer that, and I'm certainly no expert in the history of I guess the Planning Act and the process of how developments are brought to market and why that housing crisis is where it is. But I guess there's so many aspects to and so many feathers to that cap or to that answer, and I think it's 80% of SME developers have fallen out of the market in the last 30 years. Access to the land or the pipeline seems very difficult to find. Funding lack of resources within the local planning authorities and their capacity to get through. I think the assessment of schemes in the period of time that they should be, the quality of those schemes that are coming to market, their engagement with the community, and allowing that community to form an integral stakeholder part of that process really undermines the quality of potentially what's brought forward, and then mires it in dispute and the appeals process. Makes something that shouldn't be as political or at all political, very political, and that's from large sites down to even micro sites of 2 to 4 dwellings. I think also probably it seems that planning policy or the planning that whole process has been considered by many governments, I think, over the last probably 20 years, and has been a focal point of some significant change. And I think that whole uncertainty around potentially what's going to happen and what reforms might be brought in probably cause a lot of uncertainty with local planning authorities, and as we're seeing at the present moment with the review of the policies, a lot of the local plans are being shelved, and bringing or maintaining those plans just doesn't happen, and a lot of those are now superseded or overdue for updating. So, I think it's there's just so many things that have caused us to be so far beyond where we need to be. I think we're averaging around about 230,000 per annum, and we wanted to be at 300,000 a good few years ago, so we probably need to be around about 330 or 340 to get back in front of that backlog. But to me, when I started looking at how I was going to bring developments or find a pipeline for the developments I wanted to build as a developer, I was quite shocked at the lack of services that focused on a pipeline and connecting or providing an opportunity for landowners to bring forward sites or underutilised land that sits within the settlement boundaries within our cities and our towns, and to test the market, connect with people, and I think that's a primary starting point.
So I guess I'm probably going to answer this question myself, but you clearly believe it's possible to stimulate this development, this pipeline market, and get this key SME sector back into the game, as it were?
Yes, absolutely. I think that it's very much possible, and it's imperative that we do so. And just from our experience in bringing this platform to market and building that up over the course of the last few years, we get contacted often by new entrants and those that are perhaps flipping extant stock, existing buildings or terraces, and want to take that next step. And there is a significant amount of work that obviously we need to do to support them and to introduce them to digitalisation from the appraisal into the concept design, into the design development phases, and then the delivery phase, and perhaps the selling and I guess maintenance side of building as well. But there's so much we can do, and there is a huge market there that I think is very eager to get back in there, but it's too hard at the moment.
So what are those main hurdles? Because on the one hand, as you said, there's so much activity in that kind of flipping and the renovation side of things. I mean, you only have to watch TV to see the number of people who are kind of actively engaged in that piece. But it does feel, I guess, like a big jump from that to groundworks and doing the whole thing and building even just one dwelling when all you've done is renovation. What are the main hurdles? Are they financial? Are they knowledge? Are they skills? Are they having that access to new sites? What do you think those factors are?
I think it's all of those ones that you've just briefly touched upon. Pipeline obviously is primarily, or the primary one, probably access to funding, but also the capacity, I think, to access a network and a community, and look at opportunities to perhaps joint venture with existing developers, and work together, to partner together on sites. You know, we've had a few sites that have come to market where a new entrant developer is struggling to secure funding, and needs to find a partner developer to act as the primary developer on the site, and to be the person that puts forward their details, and to take responsibility for the funding for the site. But that particular developer was quite happy to give up 80% of the profit on the development, because otherwise it would not move forward, and they wouldn't have got that project management site position to hone their skills, and to improve. I think a open source attitude, very similar to how it is in the tech space, would improve and help new entrants significantly. I think that in this industry we've got this attitude that my data, my way of working is my USP, and I'm going to protect that at all costs. Whereas everything in the tech industry, especially from what I know in the 6 years that we've been building this, and speaking to Johnny in the code writing, it's all shared, it's all open source, it's all there, so that an expert in a particular area can better that code, or improve the quality of it. And I think that we need to embrace that general attitude and philosophy in this space, and really support one another, and in pushing forward sites, safety, best practice, modern methods of construction, closed loop attitudes to materials, to design development, bringing in landowners and the community into that process. And you know, if we're all working together, I think that we all benefit in that sense. But you know, obviously pipeline funding, but just sharing the information and supporting them along that journey. But it's a lot to do.
Indeed. And in terms of how you're kind of building the platform and taking the solution to market, and thinking once again, looping back to this issue that we need to build more houses in a sensible way, is it for you small sites, larger developments, a mix of the both? Because clearly there may be a perception that maybe it's easier to get smaller sites planned and develop more quickly, but obviously you need scale there in terms of lots of small ones. So what's your view about that tension between the opportunity for larger developments as opposed to lots of smaller ones?
I suppose just from experience of working with some of the really large-scale developments, and thinking back to when we were working with, you know, Countryside and Persimmon and others, when they're looking at the kind of big Millennium Village type sites and scale, and the amount of time that they would be held up in planning. And I think a lot of that's based around the fact that, you know, as soon as you talk around creating thousands of homes, you have to start thinking about the infrastructure that goes with them, the noise, the construction. You know, how do you live on site when, you know, it's phased development, and it becomes a really big hot, you know, it's a hot potato, and lots of people get involved, and the list of stakeholders is as long as your arm, and everybody has a voice and an opinion, not least from, you know, even from the starting point of where do you build these things in the first place, you know, where is the need and necessity for so much housing to all go at once. So I think there is inherent risk of the larger scale sites, and that's seen by the amount of time it takes for majors to get through planning. You know, it's 5 to 10 years is a good yardstick, you know, of anything else. Whereas smaller sites, I think the reality is that there was as many small sites, infill sites, and of sites underutilized space that would easily match those large scale sites. But if you think about, even to the point of putting, 2 stories on residential streets, or filling an empty car park up with development that would make more sense, those sites tend to attract less attention. It doesn't mean they shouldn't require attention in terms of design and what you build and how it's built. But in principle of adding a few homes in an area, it doesn't draw the attention of whether or not you should now increase capacity in the school, or whether you should increase capacity for the doctor's surgery and so on. And of course, the time to build is significantly less. So there's all sorts of areas where smaller development has an advantage, and also you're in effect pepper potting that kind of development through existing communities. So it's nice to see housing revive throughout a community that is then growing more organically, and then suddenly parachuting in 2,500, 5,000 new homes. So I think we've recognised that, and certainly the platform speaks to that, about, as Simon's already said, about getting the sort of SMEs back into this market, because they're the ones you need, the ones that want to scale from having flipped a development to doing a 4 or 10 sort of residence type development. And the big guns just aren't, they're not interested in that sort of scale of development in the same way, because they're set up huge teams and land teams and everybody else to do big scale development. So it's a part of the industry that is really missing at the moment, and needs to scale to, I think, answer some of the problems that we raised at the start, Andrew, in terms of lack of affordability and availability. It's lack of availability that creates lack of affordability. If your supply, is massively, or rather your demand outstrips supply massively, of course it's a buyer's market, a seller's market. So this is a chance to maybe readdress some of those if we can get some of these sites to market.
And given that to a large extent, obviously, that this SME sector is very critical and one that you're particularly addressing, are you see them being much more receptive now to technology as being part of the solution? Because I know it's a cliche to talk about it, but it is a relatively conservative with a small c sector in terms of using tech. And I guess, once again, it might be an oversimplification, but larger companies can perhaps normally be more receptive to data and technology, and have the kind of personnel to evaluate and help installing it. But are you seeing a change in sort of mindset with SMEs looking at digital tools to help them at various parts of the life cycle?
Well, I think part of the truth there is as well is that there's an education process, and a lot of the things that Johnny and Simon have been building, and really successfully, is to actually create tools that the SMEs have the chance to use. So things like appraisal tool that's been built now, where previously that would be a serious bit of tech that would countenance a lot of time and money to be able to use and operate and spend. There's now free and available in platform. I think this is where digital, and the sort of tech change has a really big part to play, because you can make what the bigger companies have always had available to everybody, and actually the user interface and experience can be improved vastly from what we've had. And we can see loads of areas where complexity has always been part of an issue where it didn't need to be. And I think being able to look at sites and realise that the tech can solve some of the recognised problems means that it's much easier for the SMEs to be involved with it. And I don't think the thing that's held them back from using tech is one of not wishing to. I think it's just not being available.
I think it's a lack of understanding as well. I think it does still surprise me, considering how many construction or development related software SaaS tools there are that are simply not utilized, and we won't even get into the space of building information modeling, or BIM, or digital twinning. But you'll still see so many developers. I think that they're not educated in that space, so they see, perhaps as you mentioned before, that there are sites or programs that are on TV that inspire them, and none of those those programs are engaging with companies that are, utilising project management software, or are really unlocking, I guess, 3D volumetric. You do see it every now and then, I guess, or 2D volumetric and systemised paneling and whatnot. So I think Excel is still being used for a lot of appraisals and assessments. Project management tools like a Procore that engage and manage all of your messaging and your communication, and engage or manage all of your drawing interface and coordination, are so incredibly powerful, and they're not adopted, they're not utilised, and it's unbelievable in the sense, to me, that by just simply looking at these tools and engaging with them and spending a little bit of time to educate SME educating themselves, you can save up to 30% of costs in rework and time and program, which is massive. I mean, and then the quality issues, because every time you rework, obviously subcontractors further down the program are getting frustrated. Then there's an issue of time. Time then causes, I guess, perhaps corners to be cut, and quality is the thing that's affected, which then obviously impacts GDV and impacts your carbon footprint, and all of those things I think are going to be very, very important moving forward, especially from a planning consent phase. I think once we've got these, we've got to be a carbon neutral society. Building drives all of that. And I think there'll be some real targets that are going to be imposed upon councils, and they'll be focusing in this area. I think if you can demonstrate that you can build a scheme through your processes and your adoption of digitalisation and various techs for neutral or there or thereabouts, that's going to benefit or serve your purposes in terms of consent, but also in terms of your GDV and your sales. It's attractive.
Yeah, I mean, on that point, actually thinking about appraisal and obviously the very much P&L GDV view of the world, are you seeing, and I'll use the word maturity here, in the sector around perhaps looking at value in a more broader sense, whether that's ESG, B Corp, people, planet, profit, the triple bottom line, and looking about other value statements? I mean, obviously we've got explicit things around nitrates and biodiversity offsets now, but there's a sense that the sector, as well as building more, has to look at value in a different way, and I guess that's a difficult tension between the financial realities of development projects, but addressing these other values for society more broadly. What are your thoughts on that tension, if I can use that word?
I think that we have to change how we value what we build and its benefits to society, how it impacts the environment, what its benefits are throughout the construction phase to the society and the local community, the issue of well-being, inspiring people to really, I guess, want to be the best version of themselves and their general levels of health when they're living within a space, etc. So those old metrics of time and cost are very much outdated, Andrew, and they really do trigger a race to the bottom in terms of cost and time, and before you know it, it's about the cheapest price wins, and ironically, that simply means that the quality is going to suffer ultimately. But that will be quality not in terms of just the delivery, but also the management of the delivery and the design, because there's people always involved. So if you can't afford them to be involved, then only the product will suffer. So it's a vicious circle in that sense. But there's been some incredible work that was done by the Construction Innovation Hub I think over the course of the last 3 years, which is just made its way into a BSI Flex, and that's about transitioning into a four capitals approach to assessment of development and building. So moving away from time, cost, quality, and considering the four capitals of natural capital, social capital, human capital, and produced capital. And each one of those is then, I guess, defined from the context of building and development with then sub-elements. So, for example, natural capital will have biodiversity and clean air, clean water. Produced capital will look at things like resilience against, I guess, energy fluctuations or heat. Social capital will look at, ensuring that the community within a local area of a development is integrated into that process, and they're educated and get opportunities to further their skill set and their employment opportunities. And it's about starting to understand how development what we're trying to achieve with a particular development in all of those four capitals. And then understanding how that should be integrated into the process of the design, the delivery, and its infrastructure and the overall community. So this value toolkit, yes, is I think is some exceptional work and assists with that transition that we need to see place. And it's something that we've integrated into the platform as well as a development profile along those four capitals and the sub-elements. So if a landowner registers a parcel of land, they can influence what they procure and what their legacy will be. And that'll assist them in ensuring that perhaps the community forms a very strong part of that process, or that well-being and biophilic design or modern methods of construction form a big part of the delivery, or biodiversity, etc. So yeah, we do need to transition away from those old metrics, because they no longer represent, I guess, the world that we live in, and the fact that we've only got one and it's struggling.
Exactly. Yeah, I mean, obviously you mentioned. So sorry, Jason, do carry on.
No, just to say, I suppose, to pick up on what Simon's saying is I don't think it should be seen as a burden, this change. It's about doing what's right and not ignoring the costs that developments put on the environment in any event. We're all acutely aware of the kind of figures of, construction industry accounting to 40% of the carbon emissions, and that's if you don't even look at running and life cycle costs, and arguably is obviously all significantly higher. So I mean, it's like, this is it's a real world problem that the whole of the construction industry and the built and development face. And I think those four capitals started to maybe see how that they would really transition us from the old metrics, and I guess we've had them in part in terms of BREEAM assessments and well-being and things, but it's actually a broader approach to it than that. It's much more holistic, and I think those things will start to make the difference as well in terms of how development is viewed. And we've looked for the past 10 years around the mistrust around development from communities. I think if we can actually adopt a different approach to how we look at development and its part to play, then maybe we can start to break down some of those barriers that are still there. As much as we're trying to do with digital consultation and everything else, and even speaking to some of the best protagonists in that area, they'd still say you face it with every development. So there's still so much movement and change needs to happen. I think this is the other thing that's so wonderful to see, is that this kind of approach of the four capitals approach being built into the platform, being able to be used as part of creating the legacy for a site, it's quite exciting, I think.
Indeed, and I suppose keeping on that theme of kind of innovation and change, and you mentioned, as I say, modern methods of construction and off-site, and obviously at the time of recording, it's not long since there's been fairly well publicised instances of major players having to shut their facilities, and I think from what I've read and what I understand, it's very much not that the concept itself is invalid, but without that steady pipeline of work coming into a factory with all those fixed costs, they simply haven't been able to make it work. So do you think for smaller sites, despite some of the challenges perhaps of bringing large volumetric units in, do you think a kind of large scale of smaller sites could be one of the answers to producing that consistent flow of demand into MMC factories? Because that's what we obviously need. We need that consistent flow of demand that you'd have in an aircraft factory or a car factory, where you've got that consistent demand coming in. You can run 3 shifts, you can be open 24/7 and get that recovery of overheads that you need for that, where dare I say, traditional manufacturing environment.
Yeah, I think you speak of the obviously Legal & General's factory closure, which was significant, and I think there was a lot of people were sorry to see that ended up as a problem. But of course, one of the issues for them is that they're trying to, in effect, supply their own pipeline, and I think that's where the difficulty lies. Is because as soon as your pipeline can't accommodate your own supply, you've already got a problem, and I think this is where actually the kind of the larger marketplace has a place, and certainly all of the smaller sites, whilst you may not be able to afford the truly full single modular that drops onto a site and you just stack it up, it's more complex than that. But and Simon will talk about this more, but the amounts of different types of MMC, it doesn't have to work like that. And I totally with you, Andrew, in terms of the example I heard was you wouldn't buy a new car and expect them to bring the doors, the wheels and everything else and start to assemble it on your driveway when it's pouring down with rain. You'd be like, what are you doing? Why we think that that's still suitable for building houses, with electrics and plumbing and your new kitchen coming in through all the dust, and it's kind of crazy when you think about it. The most valuable asset for most people, and it's built in that kind of way. So I think MMC is a huge part to play, and I think it's a shame whilst it's not worked, at that kind of truly full modular scale, there's huge amounts of value in it. And I think we're starting to see some of those television programs we're all talking about. You can see some of the new methods of construction. There's still a lot of wet construction on site, even if it is built in different parts. And I think that's the change, and that's really where the education piece comes for us as well, because if you can do it well and you can cite examples, it makes it much easier for others to follow. So I think that's going to be crucial as well. So
I think it's a massive part of it, Andrew. I think that there is just, you're right. I think that those huge factories, obviously, as you say, it's 24/7, isn't it? And they need to have that massive volume to make all of those huge overheads work. But there are so many smaller, almost sort of custom build focused modular companies. I think that you've got your N-House, you've got your Creods, you've got quite a few others whose names escape me. But I think that in the future, hopefully, we'll be bringing sites to them of micro sites, 2 to 4 dwellings, and potentially in the future have quite a few of them integrated into the platform, so that there will be a capacity through design configurators, and which is sort of what we're looking at, with the View Cities of this world still, is that you'll have custom build, perhaps families looking at particular sites, or even microsites with developers being able to consider a mix of various suppliers of modular that will fit onto a small site, and you can still crane in 3D volumetric elements, slew them over off the flatbed and onto site. Otherwise, it might be the systemized 2D element, which is, I think, the category 2 of the MMC framework, that might be better suited, or just SIP panels or other elements that are prefabricated. I think that's where we need to get to, though. We need to be adopting it wherever we can, to ensure that we're compressing that program, and reducing the amount of in situ work and the noise pollution, the dust pollution, the water pollution, the impact on the community. Because, you know, 9 times out of 10, I feel for the NIMBY. I believe that what they are standing up for, they have a right to. And I think that the general quality of development needs to improve significantly.
And how about almost the other end of the pipeline? We've talked there about, you know, very much the kind of construction phase, but I'm also intrigued to hear what you feel those really kind of large, and obviously we're thinking UK here, but the large sort of landowners, whether that's TfL or Network Rail or, you know, Homes England or, you know, various government property sites. What are those big landowners rather, doing about bringing a pipeline over? Because so many of them have land that effectively is sitting there. It might be brownfield, but they have land that really is ripe to be used. And once again, that feels like a bottleneck in terms of getting those sites out into the market.
There's definitely moves by many to be able to bring those sites to market, and you know, the TfL are working with the GLA on the small sites program, and Homes England have the Homes Hub, and you know, there's lots of them looking at their own land and realizing that they can start to bring it to market. I think the issue really lies, it's one of sort of disparity, that they're all doing it individually and separately. So if you imagine you're an SME looking for land to develop, you've got to go and track all these things down. You've got to go everywhere to try and find it, you know, or you're back to you know, the agents basically disposing of it. And they use their standard channels. They know how to get sites to market quickly, get the deals done, and move on. And so none of that, for me, starts to bring forward the opportunity that we're talking about, which is the new entrants that don't know where to start. It's like, you know, you're not going to find all of these things without a huge amount of legwork. And I think it's not to say that they haven't all got a place, but to find a way of unifying that, to find a way of creating a space where everybody could come and recognise that all of those major landowners are trying to bring forward their sites that are underutilised, you know, that they can dispose of, but they, you know, they can set their legacy for that land as well. I mean, TfL, for instance, they will only sell land once it's achieved planning and it's got 100% affordable, which makes perfect sense in London. Why would you dispose of land from that landowner any other way? But then at the same time, it's like, well, that opportunity probably isn't seen by as many people as it could be. And if you then combine that with the others, then actually suddenly you know, you have a sense of one place to go, and it doesn't preclude the work that happens individually, because all you've got to do is create the signposting, so everybody can still do their own thing. You need that signposting mechanism, and I think that's the bit that's challenging, and it's almost like back to where we were talking about interoperability of tech. It's actually interoperability of availability, if you like. How do you get them all into one space to advertise collectively? And I think, you know, we're offering that as a solution that I you know, I hope is taken up by many, because it's laudable in terms of its vision and what we're trying to do with Boom.
Yeah, and I suppose it's a valid thing that we must remind people that, you know, PropTech is not just about sort of data and technology, but creating marketplaces using data and technology and connecting people and places and opportunities in that way. I guess as a last question to both of you, in terms of a bit of crystal ball gazing, you know, where do you think data and tech is going to have the biggest impact positively, hopefully on the whole kind of planning and development process in the next 3-5 years? Where's the big opportunity here? Where are the big wins for us using data and tech?
I think from my perspective, I would love to say that if we could engage better with the community and home buyers, and really bring them as major stakeholders into the process, and the technology around the coordination and design development and integration of all of those primary stakeholders, I think is something that would be fantastic. And also, I think that there's going to be a lot of work around the VR, AR component of the sales and marketing of sites. which I think is really exciting. But probably also from my perspective, the one I think that has the greatest opportunity to make significant change and to make more of a marketplace for this industry would probably be blockchain, and certainly the sort of, I guess, closed sort of data ledgers, for one of, well, not the open blockchain, but the closed blockchain, and the improvements that can make to the conveyancing sector, and to perhaps the sales and ownership sector, and allowing potentially and improving affordability through owning a share of a development or of a unit, or of a dwelling, and I think that there's a lot that can be done in that sector through blockchain, that can really improve this industry.
Thanks. What are your final thoughts, Jason?
Well, so virtual reality, I think, is really interesting, because one of the biggest components of frustration around development is the not understanding actually what the development would be. And I think to think about what you could do with VR, we're sort of touching on it. We've got some work happening with augmented reality. There's been some releases recently. I think as that becomes more mainstream, and I think Apple's announcement is really interesting, because they're known for their hardware in the way that, say, Facebook and Meta aren't known for their hardware. So even though they've been trying to do it with Oculus Rift for a long time, I think Apple's announcement is going to transform what we do. And as soon as we're using virtual reality for our entertainment, everybody will be using it, and then it has the onwards chance of starting to look at development. I think if we just to add the final one in, which I know will get a lot of people very concerned about it, but and obviously it's huge at the moment, but the idea of artificial intelligence actually starting to have a play in this. Imagine if we gave all of this problem to AI and it could learn, then there would be a point where maybe we could take away the subjectivity from planning, and AI did the job for us, which is what's a necessity, what's the best way to build, what should that look like, how should it be there, and I sound cringy as well. But the truth is, many of the problems that we face, we're the worst to be able to solve those. And I'm smiling myself, because it's like I'm throwing these in there because it's exciting. It's we don't know, but there is a chance that actually AI could solve a lot of the things that we struggle with, by really, say, looking at the truth of where the need and necessity is and where it should happen, and the best place is to be able to put the infrastructure to support that, because it can make the calculations thousands and millions of times faster than we can do it, and it can come up with optimal solutions. So we're starting to see it with parametric modeling, for instance, on a site, where you can say, like, given this site, we would like to create these parameters, now give us the solutions. And parametric modeling will give us thousands of answers and give us the ones. It doesn't mean you accept them. It doesn't mean that you say that's right, but that's a great starting point to then frame the design discussion around. And I think might be true of AI. We might be able to start to train it to look at the big problems we face and say, where are our solutions? Come up with the answers, and then we can debate those, rather than starting from we just need to build loads more houses. Let's try and get them in and squeeze them over we can. Yeah.
Well, don't mention that to Johnny, because if you mention that to Johnny, Joey, we'll never hear the end of it.
Well, I think, like you, Jason, I remain optimistic that AI in the right hands can be a power for good. And as you say, we at the moment still retain the option of saying no to the suggestions it makes. So, as long as also we have that kind of explainability, that interpretability, and see how it came to those conclusions, I think, as you say, it can look through millions of possibilities and optimize, as you say, both at design level, but also that kind of social infrastructure and where best to put them, the kind of houses for the kind of demographics that might be there, and obviously look at all the affordability issues as well. So, it would seem sensible to use it as an approach to help make those decisions. And as you say, take what is certainly, I think many people would agree, a terribly subjective process in many ways, the planning process, into a more objective, rational world, dare I say. Well, on that slightly, hopefully utopian note of what AI might be able to do for us, Thanks ever so much, Simon and Jason. A fascinating conversation, and I look
Thank you,
forward to
Andrew.
catching up again soon to see how Boom is getting on. So for today,
Thank
thanks
you
ever
for
so
your
much.
time.
Goodbye.
It's been a pleasure.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks, Andrew. Pleasure as always.